Celtics almost signed Jalen Brunson and still won the title. Have you ever gotten stuck in that what if that you can't get out of your head? Like, what if the Celtics had taken Jalen Brunson from the Knicks before they were champions? Because this is the fans' pain. The detail that no one saw could change the whole story, and you only find out later when it's too late. Today I'm going to show you the real behind the scenes of this almost, why it didn't happen, and how this decision helped create the team that lifted the trophy. In less than 5 minutes, you will understand the game behind the title. Let's go. Before I tell you the detail that became the key to this almost Brunson, do the following quickly. If you enjoy NBA behind the scenes, trades that almost happened, and stories that change seasons, subscribe to the channel now because there's content like that every week, and I want to deal with you. Leave a like so I know that you want more videos in this style, and activate the bell so you don't miss out when the next Forbidden Behind the Scenes comes out. Oh, and comment below. Do you think the Celtics would have been champions with Brunson, or would they have changed everything? Beauty? So stay with me because now I'm going to show you what really happened and why it's crazier than it seems. If you've been following the Celtics long enough, you know that there are titles that tell the official story, and there are behind-the-scenes stories that, when they appear, make us stop and think, how did this almost happen? Today I want to talk to you about exactly one of these cases, an almost that, just imagining, changes the way we see the path to the top. The Boston Celtics almost had Jalen Brunson, and what makes this even more interesting is the context in which this information came to light. It wasn't a loose rumor. It wasn't someone trying to gain attention on social media. This appeared within a report about the arrival of the Celtics' new owner, Bill Chisholm, and how he was introduced to the heart of the team's sports project. The story goes that Brad Stevens hosted Chisholm in Boston, and White Grousbeck placed the 2024 title trophy on the table. Not as an ornament, but as a message, as if to say, this is where we start from. Then, soon after, Brad Stevens begins to show how he thinks about basketball in a way that few people have access to. He doesn't just talk about plays or isolated numbers. He talks about decisions that change destinies. He explains how great deals get done and why others fall apart when they seem ready. And it was at that moment, in this type of conversation that mixes vision, strategy, and coldness, that the phrase that made so many people comment came up. There was an attempt that almost put Jalen Brunson in Boston when he was still with the Dallas Mavericks. Now take a second and think with me. You enter a room, see the trophy there, feel the weight of what was achieved, and you realize that that franchise is not celebrating to sleep on the result. You are celebrating and at the same time preparing for the next step. And when a backstage of this size appears, the fan's head automatically goes to the full scene. Brunson in green, commanding the attack, controlling the pace, making decisions at the end of the game, punishing a defense that closes too much on the Jays. It's inevitable because Brunson is no ordinary player. The way he plays makes us look and think. This guy isn't on the court to look good. He's on the court to solve things. He protects the ball as if it were an extension of his body, chooses the right space, accelerates and breaks at the exact time, and when possession becomes heavy, he doesn't hide. What many people call control, and in the playoffs, control is almost a rare currency. And here comes the part that makes everything even more real. If this was indeed considered a possibility, this negotiation would have to happen before the summer of 2022, because it was in July 2022 that Brunson signed a 4-year contract with the New York Knicks, worth around $104 million. In other words, this interest from the Celtics would have been at a time when Brunson was still building his name in Dallas, leaving his role as a rotation piece, gaining space and exploding once and for all, especially in the 2021-22 season. Notice how this changes the reading. It's one thing if you want Brunson today, with what he's already proven, with the status he has, with the seasons he's had as a protagonist. Another thing is to see before, when not everyone put this player on the same shelf that he occupies now. And that in itself says a lot about Brad Stevens' eye, because this type of backstage moves fans for two reasons at the same time, out of pain and out of curiosity. Pain is that feeling well known to anyone who follows the NBA closely, of understanding that nothing is inevitable. A champion squad is not born ready, it is full of forks. There are conversations, bets, priorities, cap details, exchange demands, the player's desire, right timing, and wrong timing. Sometimes what separates a "it worked" from "it didn't" is a tiny detail, one that we don't even see from the outside. And curiosity comes right after, because the question remains in the air. What would the Celtics be like with Brunson? What would change on offense? Who would stay? Who would leave? Would the team still make the same trades? Would the long-term plan be the same? You can't hear a story like that and not imagine an alternative timeline. But the reality is that the Celtics didn't get stuck in "it didn't work." And this is where the narrative gets even better, because the path the Celtics chose after that also says a lot about the franchise. Without Brunson, the team continued working and went to get Derrick White at the 2022 trade deadline in an exchange with the Spurs that involved Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, a 2022 first-round pick, and an exchange of picks in 2028 with protection. At the time, I remember the atmosphere well. There were excited fans, there were suspicious fans, and there was that inevitable, almost impatient question: is this what will change the team's level? Over time, the answer appeared in the most convincing way possible. It changed. Because Derrick White didn't arrive with the mission of controlling the ball or being the face of an attack. He arrived to be what a great team needs, especially when the game gets tough. Someone who organizes without making noise, who defends with consistency, who reads the court at real speed, who turns the ball quickly, who attacks the closeout without precipitation, who makes the right decision with a frequency that gives the coach peace of mind. White is the type of player who improves the Celtics without asking for the spotlight, without taking away anyone's shine. And when you have stars, this is not a small detail. This is what sustains a team on top. You need someone who keeps the gears turning even when the night isn't perfect. You need someone who holds the defensive line, who closes spaces, who is reliable when the other team tries to knock you out of your plan. And if we look back at that period, his arrival helped usher in a turnaround of the season and the run to the NBA Finals in 2022. The Celtics became tougher, more balanced, more prepared for what really matters. And then, as the team continued to mature and adjust the squad, White became a central part of the nucleus. One of those players who you realize are indispensable not only for what they do, but for what they allow others to do. And then I like to pause here, because this subject tends to become a trap. People try to turn this into a direct comparison, as if it were Brunson or White. For me, that's not it. They are different players, with different roles, with different impacts. True reflection is another. The real reflection is that Brad Stevens seems to have a type of reading that doesn't get caught up in a name, but rather in the team's real needs. Brunson would be a solution for creation, control, and decision-making in the attack, especially in the half-court. White was a total balance solution, someone who supports and raises the collective standard. The point is that when a big target doesn't happen, you need to be cool so you don't despair and miss the next step. And the Celtics didn't make a mistake. The Celtics reacted like a franchise that knows what it is doing. On New York's side, Brunson became the team's driving force. He went to the Knicks and not only delivered what he promised, but also grew in responsibility and weight. And that's why this Celtics almost draws so much attention, because it doesn't seem to have been a random idea. It doesn't seem to have been a baseless attempt. It seems to have been a real read of talent and fit. And honestly, when you see Brunson taking decisive possessions and controlling games, it's easy to understand why someone like Brad Stevens would look at him and think, this could turn into something big. Now, when we bring this conversation to the present, it becomes even more relevant. The Celtics are entering a period in which roster decisions are back at the center of the debate, and this takes on special weight when talking about the future and competitiveness amid the subject of Jason Tatum's return after an Achilles injury. Regardless of exact deadlines or how the rotation will be assembled, the reality is simple. When its main player is in the process of returning, the team needs to think about how to stay strong, how to adjust what is necessary, how to protect the future without giving up what makes Boston Boston. And that's where Stevens' eye is tested again, because the casting doesn't stop when you win. It just changes phase. And that's what I want you to take with me in this conversation. The history of the champion Celtics was not built only on perfect decisions and paths without obstacles. It was built on difficult choices, on attempts that didn't work out, on targets that escaped, and on intelligent responses when something failed. The fact that Brad Stevens targeted Brunson before he became what it became shows competence, shows vision, shows study. And the fact that the Celtics found a winning path even without this movement shows maturity in the project, shows the ability to adapt, shows a culture that doesn't break when the initial plan doesn't happen. And now I really want to hear you, as if we were talking face to face. When you think of this almost Brunson, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Do you imagine Brunson solving those minutes when the attack sometimes gets stuck and the game becomes a puzzle? Do you think his presence would completely change the team's trajectory? Or do you believe that, the way things turned out, Derrick White's arrival was exactly the kind of move that builds champions? Right for me, because I like it when we take a framework like this and dismantle it piece by piece. Not to get stuck in the what if, but to understand why Boston continues to be a franchise that thinks big. And stay with me, because in a moment I want to open up this alternate timeline with you. What would likely have changed if Brunson had come, and why, even without him, the Celtics were able to put together the path that led to the top. And that's where the story gets even heavier. The Celtics didn't reach the top just because of what happened, but also because of everything that almost happened. And almost Brunson shows how much each behind-the-scenes decision can change an entire era. And if this movement had come to fruition, perhaps the NBA we know today would be different. But the point is precisely this. Even when a door didn't open, Boston found the way, made the right choices, put together a winning structure, and proved it on the court. Now I want to ask you a direct question for you to answer in the comments. If you could go back in time, would you prefer Brunson in Boston, or would you stick with what happened and Derrick White's impact on this story? Because the answer says a lot about how we understand basketball. The star that decides, or the piece that completes the puzzle. And before leaving, don't watch another random video. Go to the pinned comment, click and binge the Celtics Analysis playlist. There, I delve into exactly this type of subject, with context, game reading, and behind-the-scenes details that explain the Celtics in a way you don't see out there. Everything is organized for you to continue from here, at the right pace. If you've made it this far, you already know. Here, we don't just talk about the score, we talk about what builds titles. So click on the playlist, because the next video will make you look at this team with different eyes.